Jo Ahran, an elegant woman in her 30s, sat at the head of the conference table surrounded by her team as a young man presented on famous literature from the 1990s. When he included internet novels among the classics, Jo Ahran's expression darkened. She listened intently, her skepticism growing. The young man defended his choice, arguing for the significance of online novels from that era. Suddenly, Jo Ahran slammed her hand on the table, startling everyone. She stood, instructed him to rewrite the presentation, and left the room in tense silence. Later, in the restroom, two employees exchanged hushed whispers. They speculated about Jo Ahran's recent behavior, her sharp temper and her dismissive attitude toward internet novels. Unseen in a cubicle, Jo Ahran frowned as she overheard them. She admitted to herself that she was sensitive and proud of real literature, disliking online novels, yet she was Jo Ahran, the very author whose internet novels had once made her famous in the 1990s. Jo Ahran reflects on the most depressing chapter of her life, her 16th year. It's a memory that lingers, colored by both pain and unexpected creativity. She calls it the shame of her life, her eternal dark past. Determined, she vows to bury it with her, never to let it see the light of day again. Standing before her childhood home, Jo Ahran clutches a shopping bag, her eyes filled with nostalgia. The house feels both familiar and strangely distant, a monument to memories she can't quite reconcile. At the dinner table, her mother sighs and laments how difficult it's been to see Jo Ahran's husband lately. Jo Ahran, taken aback, corrects her, she isn't even married. Her mother presses her about marriage, reminding her that she's nearing 40. Jo Ahran tries to answer, but her stepfather intervenes, reassuring everyone that as long as she's healthy and happy with her partner, that's all that matters. Jo Ahran, out of habit, calls her stepfather uncle. Her mother scolds her, insisting she call him dad. Apologizing, Jo Ahran complies, though the word still feels foreign and uncomfortable on her tongue. She wonders if it's really her fault for feeling this distance. Every visit home leaves her suffocated. Parents chat. Her stepfather casually refers to her as a guest. The word stings. Is she really just a guest in her own home? Her heart sinks further when she discovers her childhood room has been converted into a wardrobe. Her mother explains it's because Jo Ahran rarely visits, and all her belongings have been moved to the basement storeroom. Jo Ahran stands at the stairwell, gazing down toward the basement where her past now resides. Deciding she needs some space, she resolves to stay in the storeroom until everyone else has left the house, seeking solace among her old memories. She recalls that she was happier in her teenage years compared to now. As she gazes at her old computer, she wonders whether she should take a trip down memory lane to pass the time. When she presses the power button, she has no idea what she is about to unknowingly bring back to life. Suddenly, the computer surges with electricity, and everything in front of her eyes goes dark. As she blinks in the bright light, she finds herself in her old bedroom from her teenage years. She wakes up to her mother's call and notices the loving, harmonious interaction with her parents, a stark contrast to the cold and distant relationship she remembers. This makes her suspect that something is not quite right. Her suspicions are confirmed when she realizes she has returned to her high school days. She concludes that she might have traveled into the world of an internet novel, which feels both bizarre and amusing. As she spends more days in this novel world, she realizes it is Kyonyangsi, an imaginary space from internet novels. It appears to be a world where her reality and the imagination she once poured into writing internet fiction have become intertwined. After spending several days in the novel world, she concludes that she is now Jo Ahran, an 18-year-old sophomore and one of the main characters in this fictional universe. However, she states that regardless of whether she is the main character, her only desire is to return to her own world. As she contemplates how she might get back home, she is greeted by Soyoung, Jo Ahran's only friend in the novel world. Soyoung invites Ahran to go downtown with her to have some fun. As Jo Ahran and her friends strolled through the bustling downtown area, they stumbled upon a group of strikingly handsome teenage boys. Soyoung, with a mischievous grin, introduced them as the 4 heavenly kings of Sango. The moment Jo Ahran heard that name, a wave of realization washed over her. The starting point of the novel she knew so well was about to unfold. At that very instant, Jo Ahran couldn't help but comment on the male lead, marveling at how he possessed the most breathtakingly handsome face her younger self could have ever imagined. She found herself silently questioning, where did my taste in boys even come from? As she ascended the staircase, a strange feeling crept over her. Something felt off, as if the story couldn't possibly progress this smoothly. Lost in thought, she suddenly lost her footing. With a gasp, she tumbled down the stairwell, only to land directly on Kong Wai-young, accidentally sharing a kiss with him in the most unexpected way. Just when she manages to resist kissing the male lead, something even more absurd occurs. She suddenly realizes that time has frozen for everyone except her. A few seconds later, she finds herself at the bottom of the staircase, though to her, it feels as if an entire year has passed. She soon concludes that the place where time stopped is the penalty area, a strange limbo where she is punished for refusing to follow the story's plot by not kissing the male lead. Although she isn't entirely certain about this theory, one thing is clear: she desperately wants to return to her own world. She begins to see this fictional universe as a living organism, born from her own imagination and governed by its own peculiar rules. While she may not know exactly how the story will unfold, she suspects that, according to the logic of this world, she was meant to kiss the male lead the moment she fell down the stairs. By defying this narrative expectation, she has been trapped in the penalty zone as punishment. As they return to the downtown area, Jo Ahran recalls the mysterious message written on the note, one that only she can read. If her predictions are correct, this is precisely what Jo Ahran needs to hear for the story to progress smoothly. If she's fortunate enough to complete the quest, there might be a chance for her to finally return home. Determined to fulfill the quest, she deliberately chooses to fall down the staircase, orchestrating an accidental kiss with the male lead. She hopes this bold move will help her achieve her goal. She declares, "There's a law in this world: if you fall from a great height, a love affair with Sango-chin is destined to begin." Sango-chan, however, confronts her about her strange behavior. Seizing her name tag, he warns sternly, "Meet me later, or consider yourself dead." Back at the school gate, Jo Ahran and her friend encounter the legendary 4 heavenly kings. Sango-chan offers to walk her home, and during the journey, he surprises her by asking, "Don't you want me to take responsibility for you?" Essentially asking her to be his girlfriend and, in doing so, completing the quest. Suddenly, Jo Ahran blinks her eyes open and finds herself lying in a hospital ward in her own world. Her half-brother, a teenage boy, informs her that she has been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. Later, as she opens the door to her apartment, Jo Ahran feels a wave of relief and solace wash over her. She is grateful to be back in her own space, and back to being 37 years old. A week passes as she throws herself into her busy schedule, but she can't help but wonder if that long, vivid adventure was just a fleeting dream. On one particularly hectic workday, Jo Ahran receives an unexpected visit from her ex-fiancé's mother. The woman urges her to reconcile with her son, completely disregarding Jo Ahran's wishes. When Jo Ahran refuses, the woman cruelly insults her, claiming she knew Jo Ahran came from a broken home and was a loveless child. Jo Ahran can't help but think that today is one of the worst days of her life. Back in her apartment, Jo Ahran collapses onto her bed, anxiously contemplating how she will face her employees the next day. As she closes her eyes, hoping for a peaceful slumber, a startling realization dawns on her: it wasn't just a dream. It was a parallel world, existing somewhere in the universe. And when she opens her eyes again, she finds herself back in that very same fictional world. In the days that follow, Jo Ahran spends much of her time with Kong Hwiang, who often picks her up from school. Together, they visit the downtown arcade, and she can't help but wonder, was dating really this simple back in those days? One afternoon, as she opens the door to her home, she is greeted by her mischievous younger brother, who welcomes her by tossing a hoodie over her head. She introduces him as Joe Hanem, the younger brother of the novel's female lead. Currently a high school freshman, Hanem is portrayed in the story as a lovable fool who has practiced judo since childhood. As she looks at him, Jo Ahran is reminded of someone from her own past who once held a special place in her heart. In the novel, Joe Hanem harbors a crush on Daehye, the school beauty. That evening, he asks Jo Ahran to leave the rooftop door unlocked, as he'll be late returning home after attending Daehye's birthday party. Later that night, Jo Ahran drifts off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by a phone call. Her brother's friend is on the line, informing her that Hanem is dead drunk and needs to be picked up. At that very moment, Jo Ahran senses that a new plot twist is about to unfold. She rushes out onto the rooftop, determined to find her brother and anticipating the next chapter of this unpredictable story. As she races through the streets, she encounters a familiar group of hooligans, the same troublemakers from before, who instantly recognize her as Kang Hweyoung's girlfriend. As they attempt to kidnap her, Jo Ahran lunges forward with all her strength, grateful for her self-defense skills. The chase comes to a halt when she reaches a dead end, leaving the thugs breathless and exhausted. Frantically searching for a way out, and half expecting the classic cliché of the hero swooping in to save the damsel in distress, Jo Ahran watches as the thugs in front of her are suddenly knocked backward. She looks up to see a strikingly handsome young man with flowing blonde hair making a dramatic entrance from atop a wall. It's none other than the novel's enigmatic second male lead. Eun-jae, the novel's second male lead, steps forward and confronts the thugs with a cool declaration, "I don't like these kinds of things." At the sight of him, the bullies scatter, prompting Jo Ahran to remark to herself, "Look at those pitiful NPCs." She thanks Eun-jae for saving her, but he shifts the conversation with a sullen expression, saying, "My one and only guitar is broken." Sensing his disappointment, Jo Ahran comforts him and promises to buy him a new guitar the next time. He then asks her to be his assistant when she purchases the guitar, and Jo Ahran readily agrees. When they arrive at the location where her brother is waiting, Eun-jae is surprised to discover that her brother is Joe Hanem, someone with whom he has always had a strained relationship. Eun-jae bids her farewell, promising they'll meet again soon. As she walks down the street, supporting her heavily intoxicated brother, they unexpectedly run into Kang Hweyoung, who is surrounded by a group of girls. Both Jo Ahran and Hweyoung are startled by the encounter. When one of the girls asks Hweyoung if he knows Jo Ahran, he surprisingly claims that he doesn't know her. Jo Ahran thinks to herself that something seems off about him, but she can't dwell on it, she's too busy getting her drunk brother safely home. The next day at school, Jo Ahran finds a note informing her that the condition for the start of a new story arc has been met. At the school gate, Jo Ahran and her friend find Eun-jae waiting to pick her up. Jo Ahran tells him she needs his help to escape this time, as the note ominously declared, "The fight is on." This phrase signals the beginning of a major confrontation between the students of Sangu and Gonggo High School. As Jo Ahran and Eun-jae walk together down the street, they unexpectedly encounter Hweyoung and his group. When Hweyoung sees them holding hands, he demands that Eun-jae let go of her. He asserts his claim over Jo Ahran, leaving Eun-jae visibly surprised. Turning to Jo Ahran, Eun-jae asks, "Are you really his girlfriend?" Hweyoung then commands Eun-jae to follow him, determined to settle an old score and make him pay for what he did to his friends in the past. Eun-jae, unfazed, readily accepts the challenge. Before leaving, he turns to Jo Ahran and says, "Head home safely. We'll see each other another time." As events unfold, Jo Ahran feels a sense of satisfaction. Her plan is working. The first step is complete. Now, all she needs to do is expand the battlefield by alerting Yoonji's classmates about the impending fight with the Sango High School students. She leads them to the abandoned warehouse where the showdown will take place, explaining, "Although I'm Hweyoung's girlfriend, I'm also Yoonji's friend." When they arrive, they find Huiyang and his gang already confronting Eun-jae. The sight infuriates Yoonji's friends, who march toward Huiyang's group, ready for battle. As the fight breaks out with the rallying cry, "The fight is on!" Ahran feels a surge of relief. The quest is complete, and she can finally return home. But just as she prepares to leave, her eyes meet Huiyang's. For a moment, it's as if he knows exactly what she did to orchestrate her return. A pang of guilt hits her, but she reassures herself, he's nothing more than a fictional character, and she is finally going back to her own world. As Ahran blinks and opens her eyes, she finds herself back in her bedroom. Yet, she can't help but wonder if she should return to work after the humiliating incident that happened before. Lost in thought about how she'll face her employees, she is taken by surprise when they organize an anniversary party to celebrate her 10 years since debuting in the industry. Back in her office, Ahran reflects on how she had no idea today was her 10th anniversary in the industry. She drifts into memories of her past, recalling that her mother remarried when she was 19. Since then, she stopped writing internet novels and threw herself into studying for her college entrance exam. Her main goal was to get into a university as far away from her hometown as possible. At 20, she was accepted into the creative writing department, eager to learn how to write seriously. However, as she listened to classmates ridicule and insult Ahran, her online pen name, for her grammatical errors and lack of writing sense, she realized just how poor her writing had been. From that point on, the name Ahran became a source of shame. She remembers being unemployed for a few years after graduate, as she poured all her energy into preparing for an upcoming literary magazine contest. She still recalls the overwhelming joy she felt when she received the phone call informing her that she had won the literary contest. In the end, the reason she was able to debut before everyone else was simply because she had once been Ahran. On her way home, as she walks through the parking garage, a car with flashing lights suddenly barrels toward her. As her body loses strength and her eyes begin to close, she can't help but think, she never imagined her life would end like this. Just as Ahran believes her life has reached its end, she suddenly opens her eyes, only to find herself back in the fictional world. She wonders anxiously about her real body. Is it okay? And if she dies in this world, will she ever be able to return home? At that moment, she discovers the same mysterious note tucked into her coat pocket. As she unfolds it to read, a sudden gust of wind snatches the note away. She lunges forward, desperate to retrieve it, but is abruptly struck at the back of the head by one of the NPCs on the battlefield. When she next opens her eyes, the bright white ceiling and the sharp scent of disinfectant tell her she's lying in a hospital ward. Soyoung informs her that she passed out during the fight and that she's already contacted her family. Someone will be coming soon. Just then, her brother bursts into the ward, demanding to know how she got injured. Her friend quickly intervenes, explaining that Ahran got caught up in her boyfriend's fight. Hearing the word boyfriend, Haenam can hardly believe his nerdy sister could have won, and he asks for his name. To his surprise, Soyoung says, "It's Sango-chan, Kong Huiyang." Haenam's face twists into an expression of disbelief, unable to accept that his sister could be dating someone like Huiyang. He teases her, joking that if Huiyang really is her boyfriend, he'll give up his crush on Daehai. At that moment, the door swings open, and Huiyang makes a dramatic entrance, declaring, "I am her boyfriend." Huiyang then asks Haenam why he's always hanging around Ahran. Ahran quickly clarifies that Haenam is her brother. Startled by this revelation and realizing he'd misunderstood earlier, Huiyang's face registers utter shock. When Huiyang asks Ahran why she risked her safety by joining the fight, she replies simply that she was worried about him, choosing not to complicate things by explaining that she was actually trying to retrieve the note, her only clue for returning home. Touched by what he believes is a heartfelt confession, Huiyang rushes out of the ward. As Ahran wonders what's wrong with him, we find him blushing cutely outside the hospital, overwhelmed by her words. Ahran sits in the hospital, watching Huiyang act strangely since the accident. He brings her fruit and visits every day, caring more than ever before. At the same time, Eun-jae is also in the ward and often comes to see her. One afternoon, Huiyang and his friends, along with Soyoung, arrive for a visit. When they spot Eun-jae with Jo Ahran, they get tense and ask him what he's up to. Hwiang and Eun-jae lock eyes. Hwiang says, with a hint of bitterness, that he still can't help wanting what isn't his. Jo Ahran, feeling caught in the middle, reminds herself that she belongs to nobody but herself. To clear the air, she tells them both to stop fighting and explains that Eun-jae is just a friend. Hwiang looks lost. If he's your friend, he asks softly, then who am I? Jo Ahran pauses, then answers with a smile, you're my one and only boyfriend. Hearing this, Hwiang grins with relief. He turns to Eun-jae and smirks, telling him to keep his distance, because while Eun-jae is just a friend, Hwiang is the boyfriend. Eun-jae only smiles and says goodbye, promising they'll meet again soon. As he leaves, Jo Ahran asks Hwiang why he dislikes Eun-jae so much. Hwiang's friend tries to explain, saying they used to be friends, but Hwiang quickly tells him to stop. The mystery lingers in the air. Jo Ahran, drawing from her habit of reading and writing multiple internet novels, speculates about the situation between the two people. She believes their original relationship should be the typical rivals who were childhood friends until something happened in middle school, a trope that comes in a variety of forms. She considers the first possibility for their present strained relationship, perhaps they both fell in love with a girl, following the typical first love trope, who either died or went abroad. This could explain their rivalry. Another twist might be that the female lead looks similar to their first love. But since neither has mentioned her resemblance to their first love, Jo Ahran quickly rejects this possibility. She goes on to explain that the second possibility could be that they both looked up to and followed a respected older brother figure, Hyung, who was either seriously injured or died. As a result, the two male leads hate each other and blame one another for the accident. As she spends more time recuperating in the hospital, talking with Hwiang and the others, Jo Ahran intuitively discovers a fact: she might not be able to return to her own world in the short term. After 2 weeks, Jo Ahran returns to school but is discouraged to find that there hasn't been a note yet. She says that if she doesn't find the note soon, she's probably going to lose her mind. She thinks that maybe the reason for the delay is because she was hit by a car last time, and her life and death are still unknown. She starts to wonder, if this is the afterlife, when did she die? Was it when the car hit her, or even before that? As she walks down the road, thinking about how to find the note so she can at least know whether she's alive or not, she runs into Eun-jae. He tells her that he's been discharged from the hospital too and isn't riding his motorcycle anymore, just like she told him not to. Hearing this, she smiles to herself, thinking that he's a good listener. While they stroll down the street together, Eun-jae asks her if she has his contact information. When she says no, he takes her phone and saves his number, saving it as number 1, and jokingly saying that for her, he would always be number 1. Later, during school hours, Jo Ahran and her friend Soyoung walk down the campus. Soyoung feels relieved that Jo Ahran is back to school since she can finally share her dating experience with her. As she talks about her boyfriend and her relationship with him, Soyoung gets lost in the conversation with a tender expression. Jo Ahran can't help but comment that she recognizes this expression, the one you make when love is the most valuable thing in your life, and only a person who is deeply in love is capable of making that expression. She says that you can see it in the way their face and eyes sparkle, and that she had days like that too. But it's been so long that she can't remember how she felt back then. While chatting casually, Soyoung mentions that she saw Haenum riding a motorcycle that morning. The news hits Jo Ahran like a lightning bolt. Her face instantly clouds with panic and worry. She quickly tells Soyoung to inform the teacher that she's heading to the nurse's office, but instead, she rushes off toward Haenum's school, her mind racing with concern. When she arrives at the school gate, Jo Ahran spots Haenum standing beside his motorcycle, clearly waiting for someone. She approaches him with a serious expression and pleads, "Please stop riding the motorcycle." But Haenum just flashes a mischievous grin, makes a funny face, and hops onto his bicycle. With a quick push, he rides off, leaving a trail of dust and Jo Ahran standing there, her face a mix of frustration and confusion. As she stands there, lost in thought about how to stop Hanem from riding the motorcycle, Ahran is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the Heavenly Kings, Weang and his group of friends. They greet her warmly and invite her to the upcoming union party for the first and second-year students at Sango High School. The mention of the union party sparks a memory in Ahran. She realizes that this event is an important part of the story, and she suddenly feels certain that she will soon receive a quest note.